All right. Unless anybody has a reason that we shouldn't start exactly on time, I'm going to go ahead and start. Again, very excited to see that we have folks from all over North America. I saw one reporting from Ontario, Canada, as well as Georgia, Boston, like I already said, California, and of course, Chicago, naturally, obviously, where most folks are, and naturally being the Chicago Digital Accessibility Meetup Group. So really excited that we have the chance to come together. As folks, most of the folks know who know me in person, I moved out to San Francisco. So these remote meetups actually offer a rare opportunity for me to come in and see everybody all over again. So I'm so excited that I get to come and be a part of it, the accessibility group remotely. So thank you everybody for attending. Thank you for spending May 5th with us, even though perhaps you'd rather go and have a margarita or, have a margarita while you are tuning in. That's also acceptable. I'm Santina, as it says on the slide. And we already did the introductions. We'll, perhaps to have some after to just chat and kind of talk and catch up as well. So you can feel free to stay after for that as well. Feel free to continue introducing yourselves as well while I'm speaking. Just a reminder that if you do not want to have your face captured in any way, or you don't want to speak, that's absolutely okay. We're completely fine with that. Just make sure you turn off your video camera and or turn off your audio, and certainly turn off your audio while the speaker is speaking. We'll go ahead and go through the announcements and introduction, and then we'll get started. It should not actually take me that long to go through the slides. We'll get started with our speaker, Crystal Preston Watson. It's Always Sunny in Mobile Accessibility. And then we'll wrap up around 7:30. If you'd like to follow along with the slides, you can certainly do so. We have speakerdeck.com/alichai, A11Y Chai, and Nick did post that in the chat as well. So if it's easier for you to click on a link, go ahead and find that link in the chat. Live captioning is available on any device with a web browser. So to access that, you simply go to streamtext.net/player?event equals CDA with the capital C, capital D, capital A. Live captioning is sponsored by McDonald's. So thank you very much, McDonald's, for sponsoring the live captioning. And please do keep the discussions going on Twitter, A11Y Chai, at A11Y Chai, or hashtag A11Y Chai. And, taking quotes from the speaker is a great way to not only boost your own visibility, but certainly boost the visibility of the speaker. So the speakers always appreciate when you can at them along with an interesting piece of information that she might have had that resonated with you. Of course, we do have our YouTube channel. You might be tuning in live on the YouTube channel right now, but if you'd like to have this presentation afterwards, you want to send that out, or you want to refer back to something, just go to youtube.com/A11Y Chai, A11Y Chai. Oops. Sorry about that. Again, if you prefer not to be in the recording, check to make sure that your camera is off. Please do hold Q&A for the very end. We will be monitoring chat, as I mentioned, as you might have heard me say. Nick, myself, and the rest of the organizers are going to go ahead and monitor those chats, and we will raise those questions at the very end. Also, if you have any technical issues or any questions, please feel free to ping us in the chat. We will go ahead and monitor those and help you out as much as we can. So I want to open this up for jobs. Feel free to take yourself off of mute if you are offering a job, and or just post that in the chat. And of course, if you are looking for a job as well, feel free to take yourself off mute and mention that, and or post that in chat. So I'm just going to pause for a minute so folks can go ahead and do that. very quiet today. All right. Not your only opportunity. So if you have a job to offer and or if you are looking for a job, go ahead and mention that in the chat and we can circle back around towards the end. And also we can announce that we can open it up for another opportunity if folks weren't able to unmute or didn't get a chance to say that. Also wanted to plug our next event that's going to be occurring on May 21st for Global Accessibility Awareness Day. We're going to have an Invisible Disabilities panel where myself, Kedra Chaney, Fen Slatterly, and like I said, myself. So hopefully you can join us for that. Very excited that we will be talking about invisible disabilities. And now to introduce Crystal, Crystal Preston Watson, pronoun she, her. Crystal is a quality engineer with a focus on accessibility at Salesforce. She believes accessibility is a human right and is passionate about building accessible and inclusive applications for everyone. And of course, the Twitter, go ahead and at her if you do quote her at SCOPIC engineer, ENGINEER. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Crystal. So Crystal, I'm going to stop sharing. You can feel free to go ahead and bring up your presentation.
Okay, let me make sure I do this out. And already I have done it wrong. So let me share my screen. And then I will share my presentation. Hopefully you can see, you can now see my presentation. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Crystal, and this is It's Always Sunny in Mobile Accessibility. And as you can guess, I am a huge It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia fan. And I realized that this title could be a little bit, given the kind of style of the show, it could be a little bit kind of maybe weird, but I love the show. So I just thought, you know what, I'm passionate about local accessibility and I really like that show. So you know what, going with this title. So I am a quality engineer at Salesforce.org, and on the screen is Frank Reynolds, who is played by Dana DeVito in the show, dressed as an art critic. I am forgetting the character's name, but this is going to be my Halloween costume for this, this next year, even if it's just sitting in my house due to everything that's going on. This is kind of an overview of what I'm going to talk about going forward, and I'm I realize I'm like looking to the side on the. So for those that can see me, I'm I'm someone who's very awkward, and also I am someone who has visual impairment. I have keratoconus, and I was born with like ocular toxoplasmosis, so I don't have my macula scarred in my right eye. So this is blown, the screen in front of me is really zoomed in. So, so this is just kind of preference. If I go like that and I'm staring off, I'm reading my, my notes. On this, so I'm gonna go, this is our kind of framework for what I'm going to talk about tonight. So I'm going to say a few words on mobile usage, do a WCAG overview, and for those who may not know or new to web accessibility and the guidelines, exploring WCAG 2.1 mobile success criteria, and then explaining a little bit about Android, iOS features and tools. I do want to preference, this is really not getting into any sort of like code. I just don't, I feel like that would just, unless we wanted to take like 5 hours and dive deep, and that's it. I didn't want to put it in the code. This is kind of a a kind of introductory talk to mobile accessibility, and really kind of getting, some of the, the gist of the guidelines that WCAG covers that specifically applies to mobile devices. So on the screen is a screenshot of an article from the BBC, and the headline says, "People think you can't be blind and use a phone." And this is something that's really prevalent with a lot of the public when they think about, especially with those with disabilities. They don't think about them. They think about people with disabilities as, in a way of, well, they just sit in their house and they don't do anything, and they're sad and they should be pitied, and only, and maybe will, if there's some kind of feel good pandering story, that they've, I don't know, did something, that's how, you kind of, especially in media, you see a lot of people think about people with disabilities. And this article really showed and talked about how people who were blind and with visually impairments were harassed about their phone usage. This came out in 2019, the beginning of 2019. I read this article, and the fact is that with especially people who are blind and visually impaired, mobile devices are widely used, and it's actually for a lot of people that is their main connection to the internet and to the web. Especially when we think about mobile accessibility, there is a focus on desktop, and mobile devices made secondary, especially if it's if your company is not making their primary product is not a mobile application. But the fact is, there are many people in developing countries, and even if you want to frame it in US, in underserved locations, especially in inner cities, in rural areas in America, where mobile devices are their main connection to the internet. There's no there is no cable. There's their internet connections are really or poor if non-existent, and so using their phone is their main lifeline. And for those with disabilities in those areas, that's the same thing. So if someone has a disability who lives in the area that doesn't have stable internet connection, a phone is going to be what they use to connect to really connect to the outer world. And that's where I want, I've really been focused on mobile accessibility. And I know for me, as I rely more on using screen readers, I actually started mainly using my mobile phone. So I use TalkBack on my mobile phone, and I use an Android device. And then I started to use screen readers on desktop, mainly VoiceOver, as I use a Mac. But mobile accessibility is very important because it really does. I mean, it's something that and forgive me, I'm a little bit nervous. So, but it's really something that we do need to be concerned about. And this is from WebAIM. This is just something, this is from their, this is from 2017, from their readers survey. This is the reader survey number 7. And on the screen is a graph that charts mobile screen usage. And it goes from January 2009 to October 2017. And from over the years, the the amount of readers and of people who they surveyed who use mobile screen readers increased significantly. It was 12% in 2009, and in October 2017, it was up to 88% of the people who they surveyed used a mobile screen reader. I just looked today from their latest survey in 2019, and though they didn't really poll for this particular of mobile screen reader usage in this particular way, but the 86% of the people did respond. Actually, yes, and so 80% of the people who did respond did use a screen reader on their phone, so it's pretty much the same. And though it's only going to grow. And I know like WebAIM is just a small portion, but you can kind of take just by the fact that, you know, screen reader, mobile phone usage just in general is on the rise. That only means that people who rely on accessibility and technology also will be using mobile phone, smartphones, and that their need for assistive technology like screen readers will also be on the rise also. And so we're going to go on to WCAG overview. Hi, everyone out there. I hope you're all doing well. You know what? I'm going to take a little bit, and I am someone I do get. Believe it or not, I do improv. So I'm just going to improv right now. I get really nervous. I have social anxiety disorder, if you couldn't tell. If you couldn't tell. So I get really nervous. So I'm just going to shake it out. I'm going to do, you know, I'm not going to do voices because if you ever see me do an improv show, I only do a Southern voice. Or when I try to do Italian voice, they're like, that's a really good Jamaican woman that you did. And I'm like, okay. So let's go on to WCAG. So this is the WCAG overview. For those of you who are new to web accessibility, WCAG is, and I pronounce it WCAG, I think so you can pronounce it different ways. That's just the easiest way for me to pronounce it. It stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And there are a series of guidelines that many people use throughout the globe for improving web accessibility. It was created by W3C, which is the World Wide Web Consortium. And yeah, like if you're new to web accessibility, you work with it, you know, it's something that you do professionally, career-wise, you know WCAG. So now when we kind of talking about, I don't know where everybody is on their knowledge of web accessibility, so I'm not going to go too deep into kind of the intro and kind of like all the basics of WCAG, just because when I've tried to do this talk has ended up being 2 hours. So, but I'm going to give the brief overview. So on the slide, we're going to talk about the 4 principles of WCAG. And these are very, I think if you take away anything from WCAG, even if you don't work, if you're not doing things day to day for accessibility, and I know kind of unfortunately, the nature of some people, you know, positions is that in certain companies, you don't get to do accessibility like all the time. And that's not you have some companies that are like, well, you know, still think it's nice to have. And it's like, well, we'll get to that later. And, you know, I'm not going to go off of that. That's a whole different area. But if you're going to take away anything, if you're going to remember anything, especially even if you're not focused on accessibility, remember these 4 principles of WCAG, and those are perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust, which is you can work out to poor, which I like. And if you were like a raver in like the 90s, there's plur, and yeah, so I intertwine those up. So perceivable, going to explain this more, is users must be able to perceive the information being presented. Operable, users must be able to operate the interface. Understandable, users must be able to understand the information as well as the operation of the user interface. Robust, users must be able to access the content as technologies advance. And then also when it comes to conforming to the WCAG guidelines, there's 3 levels of conformance. There's level A, which is the kind of really, the minimum amount of accessibility that you can have for a site. So the most basic web accessibility features. Level AA, and that kind of addresses the most major, most common accessibility issues. So level A deals with the biggest and most common barriers for disabled users. And level AAA, the highest and most complex level of web accessibility. I got this from W3C, and it does this, and it says most complex, but I think it's just really higher standard, because I think versus I like that it's the higher standard, not most complex, because I think that can really intimidate some teams of like, well, let's not even try for a AAA on anything, like, because that's too complex. I think you can't get maybe AAA on every single piece of function that you have on your website, but for a lot of areas, I think for you can definitely try for that, and you can definitely succeed. So that's what I think. So less of the most complex and just the higher standard. So if you're not in the know, there is WCAG 2.0, and there's WCAG 2.1. And WCAG 2.0, which were the guidelines, they were released about nearly 10 years ago. And one of the main things is, like, if you think about mobile accessibility 10 years ago, which is 2010, smartphones were a thing, but it was still kind of like in the, I want to say, like the Wild West of figuring out like apps. Like, it was only, I forget when the iPhone really came out, but I still feel like, mobile devices and mobile phones were still kind of in their toddler ages, maybe around like that, age where kids like learn the word like no. And like they'll say no. It's like, do you want ice cream? And it's like, no. And it's like, do you want like broccoli? And it's like, no. And it's like, so everything is no. So that's kind of where I feel when WCAG 2.0 came out. That it was there was a lot going on when it came to mobile applications and mobile development. And so it really didn't deal with mobile accessibility. It was mostly geared towards, browser web-based accessibility, and you pretty much had to take what it said about that, and then try to figure out and apply it to your mobile device. And that's really it works for basic things, say like with alt text and color contrasts and things like that. But when you get into native mobile kind of functionality, that's where it gets really tricky, and the guidelines really don't. There's really not a good way to kind of take the guidelines and then for like, say, a web, a site in a web browser, and then apply them to a mobile application. So 2.1 came out, I believe it was the beginning of 2018, January 2018, and pretty much 2.1, it takes all the success criteria from 2.0, So there wasn't like anything of like, oh, we're gonna throw stuff out and then we're gonna put, you know, and like, you know, and like we're doing it, like we're just doing it all, like all over it. Pretty much everything for 2.0 is in 2.1, but they added more stuff. So there's 17 new success criteria, and there's 8 that kind of that deal specifically with mobile accessibility. So, and that's where, you know, this talk really focused on. We're just going to go through those 8 and kind of go a little and just pretty much break it down into like, I say into more kind of conversational explanation, because I know when I have dealt with testing for this was not, you know, great, because WCAG, I love it. I love dense documentation, but not everyone does. Like I, I read Ulysses when I was a kid, and I don't know why. I also read Les Miserables. I didn't like that book. And you know, if you ever want to like, hear me talk about Hugo, like in Les Miserables, we can just find me after. I'll talk about that. But let's go on. So WCAG 2.1 mobile success criteria. So there, as I said, there are 8 new success criteria. These specifically deal with mobile accessibility, and I'm just gonna talk about how just go through them and just kind of explain what that means and what that means for mobile applications. So first one is orientation. So this is 1.3.4 orientation. It's performance level AA. And it says content does not restrict its view and operation to a single display orientation, such as portrait or landscape, unless a specific display orientation is essential. And pretty much what this says is that your application needs to honor the orientation that the user wants. When it comes to a lot of applications, they tend to want to have the user stick to one particular view. And this is not great for people who have, say, if they need for their phone to be in a certain position, if you're trying to, if your application won't work in that position, then they are barred from using it. I know TalkBack is very weird if I use it in landscape mode. I've tried to use when I've had a website that's tried to make me use it in landscape mode, and then I tend to like to pull up the TalkBack menu, and I can't, so I have to constantly pull, like, you know, go like this, pull up the TalkBack menu, go back like this. It's not it's not a great experience. Now, it's excluded like from applications where it's necessary to force a particular orientation. Say you have a photo application and there's a landscape mode. So obviously you don't want to change, you don't want the landscape mode to be in portrait mode, but that's the only real case. Otherwise, it's not, I mean, it's not wise. It's really just not good. I think overall good usability, like your user knows what they want, and then trying to force them because you think it's better for your application is, I don't know. It's kind of like you're really, I think you're doing yourself a, it's detrimental to you. I think your application is detrimental to the user also. Next up is 2.5.1 pointer gestures, and that's level A. And that says all functionality that uses multi-point or path-based gestures for operation can be operated with a single pointer without a path-based gesture, unless a multi-point or path-based gesture is essential. This breaks down to just using simple gestures. And, you know, so if you have a application and it requires you to use like 4 or 5 fingers for to operate, you also need to provide a way for a user to use a single pointer. But the things that what's excluded from this is any gestures that are included with the operating system, so iOS or Android, they don't have to meet that. So, but if you have an application where you're like, hey, it's like, I just want, we're gonna have them pet it like a cat and they need to point all 5 fingers onto that. Yeah, that's cool, but you still need to allow them to to have a single point of touch. And a good example of this, and which is is a map, like say something like Google Maps, though that's not what's on the screen. It is a kind of generic mobile application on the phone. So if you have a mobile and a map app on your phone, I think most of them have like the pinch to zoom, or you pinch to zoom, or you move 2 fingers to go out. But usually, if the application is good, they also have the plus or minus button that allows you to zoom in and out. Now, when it comes to, say, an application like a lot of, and you're going to hear me say this a lot, video games are excluded from this. And this is going to come up. So I feel like when it comes to any application that would be excluded, there's really not really a lot of good ones other than games. And even when it comes to that, a lot of games should have better accessibility, but this is not a video game accessibility presentation. Next, 2.5.4, motion actualization. I am so sorry, I'm mispronouncing that. Oh, this is level A. Function that can be operated by device motion or user motion, can also be operated by the user interface components, and responding to the motion can be disabled to prevent accidental actuation, except when supported interface or essential. So supported interface is, those 2 exceptions are talking about really assistive technology that the user might be using, that they, so that actually would not have to meet this criteria if there's, if a user is using something that has motion as part of its function. An essential, again, gains. Gains. That's again, that's excluded. So an example of this is on Android, and I believe on the latest Pixel, I think Pixel 3 and Pixel 4 phones, there's Active Edge. So it allows you to squeeze your phone and it'll pull up your like Google Assistant, and you can have it do a couple other things. But the thing about this is that for those who have limited mobility, who may have tremors, they can't do that. They can't squeeze their phone to do that. The same for, I know I have right now, because I dropped my Pixel, I now have a Moto 7, and you have to shake it to get the flashlight to come on. And I have had this flashlight come on many times. And again, for someone who has tremors, this thing, and it doesn't take a lot for this flashlight to come on. So, again, with this particular sex criteria, you should be able, a user should be able to disable this, and then they should be able to have an alternative way to pull up different applications or functions without having to do any sort of motion. Next slide is 2.5.2, pointer cancellation, and this is a level A. For a function that can be operated using a single pointer, at least one of the following is true: no down event, abort or undo, up reversal, essential. And so when it talks about a no down event of the pointer is not used to execute any part of the function. No abort or undo. Completion of the function is on the up event, and the mechanism is available to abort the function before completion, or undo the function after completion. Up reversal, the up event reverses any outcome for the preceding down event. And essential, completing the function on the down event is essential. So pretty much this is dealing with when a user is completing an action, like it allows users to cancel or kind of back out of an action if they accidentally trigger one. And this really kind of, you see this come into play a lot with drag and drop. And pretty much what you want to do is, if you can have your applications really emulate a keyboard or a key like a keypad, a pad, that's really what is preferable, versus especially on the focus if someone has again limited mobility. That's, you know, it's really easy for them to accidentally you know, click on an incorrect action. And so on this slide, this is something I actually ran into when I used to use Spotify. So this slide, I'll read through it, is when you accidentally hit the wrong button on Spotify and banish an artist you enjoy to the shadow realm. And then there's a guy in a really cool sweater saying, "I guess I die," and shrugging. It's only been 5 years. I'm sure they'll fix it soon. So this came about on Spotify, where if you went to, and they actually have corrected it, but you would go to interact with, I think it was actually like, I think either like the song or follow the artist, and then it actually said that you didn't want to hear them anymore. And this is something that really does happen with a lot of function, where it's like drag and drop this, and then, you know, once you drag in the middle of the drag, there's no way, like if you drag the wrong option, you can't back out of it. So either, you know, it's like, you know, if you're, it's like, okay, I want to just like lose all my money in, you know, Animal Crossing Stocks Exchange. Like, let's just prove that, because I've been playing a lot of Animal Crossing. And if you had an app like that, and you're in the middle of like, you're dragging to say no, I don't. I really want all my turnips to have, like, I don't want to lose them. But you realize that you're right over the yes, please do. You should have a way for the user to back out of that. And so this is what this success criteria is dealing with. Pretty much when you have kind of gesture-based functionality, please just have ways for users to back out of things if they accidentally do things they don't want to do. Next slide, which is 2.5.6, concurrent input mechanisms. And this is level AAA. This is web content does not restrict the use of input modalities available on a platform, except where the restriction is essential, required to ensure the security of the content, or required to respect user settings. So pretty much this is saying, don't limit the user's choice of input. And this comes from, I think, I haven't really come across it too much, but for a lot of people, especially if you're someone who's blind and visually impaired, they may want to use a Braille keyboard. And actually on the screen, this is a Braille keyboard for both Android, and it works on Android and iOS, and it's called Hable. I do not know how to pronounce it, but it's a company out of the Netherlands, and yeah, and it's really cool, and it's very compact. Where I've seen some other Braille keyboards that are quite larger. So this is actually very, very compact and mobile. And really, if you have an application, you shouldn't block what a user wants to use to interact with your site, just like on desktop. So and that's not just going for access technologies, like what I have right now. I have headphones on, and just think if I couldn't use a headphones to interact with Zoom, like you don't want to do that. I actually use headphones a lot because when I use TalkBack, especially at night, kind of the nature of my impairment, at night is even worse and like glare. So I use TalkBack when I'm like reading in bed, so my husband doesn't hear me at night, where I'm like trying to read through things, and I'm like, because I get up super early, and I don't want to be at 5 a.m. like, yes, listen to the birds and me, reading the daily news, having TalkBack read the news to me. And one thing that doesn't have to fulfill the success criteria is games. It's always games. Games are always at it, but honestly, I don't think it should be, but hey. Okay, next slide. We're almost, I think we're halfway there, about halfway. This is 2.5.5 target size, and that is level AAA. The size of the target for the pointer inputs is at least 44 by 44 pixels, CSS pixels, except when equivalent, which means there's another link or control on the same page that has the same action. Inline, so inline is if the target is within like a link, it was in a block of text, so a link within a block of text. User agent control, it's a default user agent and not something that's modified by a developer. Or essential, games. More games. So on this slide, I just took this straight from Apple design because it's perfect. And we have two examples. The one on the left is a hand pointing at two buttons. Both are 44 pixels by 44 pixels. The first one is a cancel button that the finger is over, and to the right of that, the cancel button is a save button, and the second example to the right is both of the same buttons from the first example, but very much smaller. And as you can tell, this is something for people who have mobility issues. I mean, I have issues with very small buttons. I think this is not, this is something that I think a lot of people have to deal with. It's just very small buttons. And I feel that, especially when it comes to web apps versus native applications, is that usually there's something that's not accounted for. So the buttons, it's like, oh yeah, well, we'll just, we'll have them. It's not a native app, it's just a web app. And then somehow you'll go to the site and like the buttons are all just like super small. And I'm like, I have fat fingers and I'm just going like, I have literally, one place I've seen this and it's better, but Amazon had this problem, and they had this problem where it's like buy one click button, and I almost bought like a $300 yeah, it was like $300 headphones. It's like, so I was like, oh no, like it's, it was just like I didn't. It was very small, and I was trying to like click something. So yeah, this is very important. This is something that accessibility, but and usability. Just there's no reason for it. You don't need super small buttons. Like this is not an app for ants. Next slide, 2.5.3, label and name. So for user interface components with labels that include text or images of text, the name contains the text that is presented visually. So this is talking about when you have control, like mainly you want the text of the label to be at the starter name. This is a little bit complicated. This is probably the one I have a little bit because I'm not, in my day job, I'm a QE, and so I'm not doing a lot of development at the moment. But the label identifies the control, so the label is what you're going to read. So if you see something that says search, the label is going to be there and it says search. But the name is what your screen readers are going to use to identify the control to the user. So you want the label and the name to be the same, or at least the start. You want the label to have the start of the name, so there's no confusion to the user when the screen, say a screen reader, is reading off the control. And so this is my example. This is from this Copia report, and it's a toy that says dogs, but they're clearly two ostriches. And really, pretty much what you need if you want the accessible name to match the visible label, because it's it gets very confusing, especially when you have your screen reader read off and it says, okay, submit, and then it says send, and it's like, okay, what am I doing? You can't assume that, well, of course they'll know that submit and send is the same thing, because again, you're assuming for those with who maybe have mental impairments, that's not that can cause some confusion. So matching your accessible name to the visible label. And this is the very last success criteria. And this slide says 2.1.4, character key shortcuts. If a keyboard shortcut is implemented in content using only letter, including upper and lowercase letters, punctuation, number, or simple characters, then at least one of the following is true: turn off, remap, or active on focus. So this is pretty much dealing with like hotkeys or the keyboard shortcuts. So turn off means that a user is able to turn off the shortcut. Remap is that you can remap to a shortcut that has more non-printable keyboard characters, so Control, Alt, etc. And active only on focus. The keyboard shortcut for user interface component is only active when that component has focus. So I wanted to put at least one more It's Always Sunny image up, and this is Charlie from It's Always Sunny, and he's in front of a corkboard that says Pepe Sylvia from a very awesome episode. And it's just really just saying, if you're going to have keyboard shortcuts, you allow the users to either turn theirs off or remap them to fit for the best for their needs. This kind of takes us this or the 8 success criteria. I know it's quite a lot. But really, I mean, it's all, when it's all said and done, it's really just good things to do. Like this is, I think it's all kind of inherent. Like, yeah, why, like, pretty much let the user do what they need to do to use your application. That's what it kind of breaks down to me. It's like, don't stop them from using the orientation that they want. You know, make sure they can they know what things are, you know, named. You know, let them, you know, use the input, the keyboards that they want, the headphones that they want. So it's, I think WCAG can be a very dense, but when you hopefully this little breakdown really kind of helps you out in kind of, you know, getting the gist of what these success criteria are. And I wanted to go over a little bit over like different accessibility features and tools for the different operating systems. So I'm going to go both Apple and Android. I think when it comes to mobile accessibility usage, we can see right here, this is from WebAIM, it's another graph. It's talking about mobile platform usage, and the graph goes from 2010 to October 2017, and it has iOS, Android, and others. iOS is kind of has the larger share, so starting with 33% of the survey people surveyed using iOS in 2010 to 76% in October 2017, and then Android, where 4% of the users surveyed used Android, going to 22% in October 2017, and then others started at 63% in December 2010, and then going to 2% in October 2017. I believe, I couldn't figure this out, but I wonder if that's when like Windows Phone died. So like that, this, I have that feeling, because I'm like, I think that's when, like, I think that was like Windows Phone. So, because so that, so I know, and I still want to focus on both, because I do feel that when it comes to mobile devices, they're more iOS. And this is certainly just my opinion. Price wise, I feel that there's a barrier for some to get an iPhone with prices. I know that's kind of, it's become a little bit, you know, maybe that's not true so much now, but in the past it was, where, you know, the price of an iPhone versus, I don't know, for like, you could get some burner like you know, phone with Android. I feel there's, you can't and you shouldn't just focus on improved accessibility for just one particular OS for people. So I know for a lot of people there, and a lot of companies, they only have iOS. They may have only iOS native applications, and that's all you can do. But there are a lot of places where they have both, and one or the other suffers, because then it's, and I know that's true for outside of accessibility, but I think it's just, I don't like it. I feel that, you know, if you truly care about accessibility, you're going to make sure that everyone can use it, even if they use the less desirable, you know, Android, which I know there's, I got called old because I use an Android by someone on Twitter. We're not gonna, that's outside of that, but yeah, I so that's why I'm kind of focusing on both and not just focusing on iOS, even though iOS has the bigger share. So when it comes to iOS features, they have quite a few, and they both kind of have similar features. So iOS has VoiceOver, which is a screen reader. They have Zoom, where you can zoom in for text, magnifier. You can invert colors. You can make text larger, and you can also use switches, which is for people who have limited mobility. They can use a switch to control their phone without, again, that goes back to the success criteria of allowing users to use alternate inputs to navigate your site. Android accessibility features are TalkBack, which is the screen reader, magnifier, switch control, also high contrast text, larger text, live caption, and transcribe. Live caption and transcribe are new. Live caption is, I actually talked to the developers there because it wasn't really playing nice with TalkBack, but they've put a fix in mainly because I was like, I don't, because I complained enough, and I was like, well, I use both of these. I use TalkBack and live caption, and so they're putting a fix in because live caption would, like TalkBack wouldn't announce when live caption was turned on, and I just feel if your phone is doing something, it should announce that it's, that something has turned on. So just special note about TalkBack and VoiceOver, especially when it comes to testing, these are probably the biggest kind of tools that you'll use. This, I mean, really, you definitely, you don't want to neglect any, then that's other things. And I feel sometimes that it can happen where there's not, like zooming in on text, making sure that things don't get distorted. If someone zooms say 200 to 400, but TalkBack and VoiceOver are usually used, are certainly the two biggest kind of testing tools to use. And those are the two screen readers for TalkBack for Android, VoiceOver for Apple iOS. So when it comes to tools, and I realized I forgot to fix this slide. X for iOS actually is I don't think it's no longer a thing. I could not find a, it used to be it was going to be a tool that DQ was bringing, like their apps for Android. I can't find the page for it anymore, and it's kind of been scrubbed from their site. So if I'm wrong and I just was looking in the wrong place, someone please, please let me know. And also the accessibility inspector for Xcode. This is especially a really good tool for use if you're doing iOS app development and you want to, it's pretty much the main tool you're going to use. There are other tools out there. These, don't look at the tools I'm listing here as the end all be all, because they're not. These are just ones either I've heard about, or so for X for iOS, I've heard about it, and that's pretty maybe, or I've used personally. Android accessibility tools, you have Axe for Android. That one does exist. So, and it's, really good for, again, for any sort of Android development, and you want to accessibility development, Axe for Android is very, very good. Accessibility scanner. So if you have an app, you have an application and you want to scan for accessibility issues, and your accessibility scanner for Android is a very good tool. And then also the Android accessibility test kit. This is just the site. If you go to, if you're an Android developer, it has just pretty much good resources and information about kind of how to, really, develop for accessibility and for Android application. And that is it. Thank you very much. This is my website. I think the LinkedIn is wrong, but it's correct on my website. And so, website, PrestonWatson.com. I'm not going to read the LinkedIn one since it's incorrect and I forget what it is. I do know I corrected it on my website. And my Twitter is at SCOPIC Engineer. And I do have some resources. You can at me on Twitter or find me on LinkedIn. And if you want some links to these resources, I can definitely let you know. I can send those to you. Yeah, and that's it.
Awesome, Crystal. Thank you so much. Everybody is responding very well in chat, so you can go ahead and read that. And if folks want to take themselves off mute and give a little golf clap, please feel free to do so. Or go ahead and yes, thank you.
Thank you all.
That was really great. That was really great, and I especially loved how you took the time and kind of settled yourself in the beginning of the presentation. That is important. It's so tough to give a presentation to folks, and you handled that amazingly well. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
It's so funny. It's like I can do improv, and and I only get nervous before, but I'm like, it's like I do this as a job, but I'm like, oh no.
I know when the two kind of coalesce, it becomes a whole other different thing. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Some of the questions that we received throughout, I'm going to go ahead and read them. I know that some other folks tried to answer them, but I'd love to give you the opportunity to talk about that. One question we had was, how does allowing the changing of orientation help users who need additional accessibility to use apps and mobile websites? So that's specifically with the change of orientation, if you could speak to that.
Oh, okay. So this is especially for those who need, say, someone who does have like limited mobility, who may use a like a mouse stick. So they wouldn't actually be able to hold the say their phone or their iPad in their hand, and it's going to probably be attached to something, so they can't constantly turn the phone different ways, and so that's why you want to be able to allow people to just, if they want to have a fixed orientation, you shouldn't force that. Hopefully that's what they were referring to with this, that why you would want a user to have a fixed orientation, because some people just literally cannot keep switching the phone around. Also, as I said with TalkBack, I found when I've had to say, if a site or application requires me to use in a landscape, then if I can't, it works, but I have to, I have to go like this to pull up the menu, because I'm very reliant on the menu for TalkBack. And so if the application is in landscape, I can't pull up the menu. The menu can only pull up with the gesture in portrait. So and that's very, and again, for me personally, it's not the end of, I can do it. It's very frustrating, but for some people, that's just literally not possible.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I did get a question. I think it's directed specifically for the accessibility organizers, asking if the slides would be available on the A11Y website. I do not believe we have a website, but we will go ahead and post them in meetup.com, our Ally Chi website, or the meetup group there. So please do look for them there. And I don't know, Crystal, if you plan on posting them to your website, we can go ahead and direct folks to that as well if you'd like.
I will, but I will, but they will not be up tonight.
Yeah, no, not a problem. And Nick did
Yeah.
chime in the
So,
chat and say that they are on the event page. So if folks want to
yes.
access that immediately, you can certainly do that. And we do have links in the chat as well, so that's not a problem. Another question that we had was, is there a good tool for checking color contrast on iOS or Android? For now, I take a screenshot and then use color contrast analyzer on my desktop. That's from Glenn Walker.
Mm, I've, you know what, like, I've heard that there might be, off the top of my head, I know I've tried various ones, and this has been like about a year ago that I've really looked. I can't, there's none that I can say, I can absolutely say at the top of my mind, yes, this is a good one to do. Honestly, what you're doing already is what what I've done. So if anyone knows one, I would love it. So, but I don't know of one. I'm sure there's some out there that say that they are, but again, I haven't found any, or I'm just like, yes, this is amazing.
Sure. So if folks do have any kind of recommendations, feel free to add that in the chat. I do know that Android does have a tool, but you need to have that hooked up to the computer. Otherwise, I don't know of any myself. So
Yeah. Oh, that might be, yeah, through Android Studio. Yeah, and
exactly.
that's, yeah, and so that's, and I believe iOS is the same way. That's, again, it's kind of one of those things of, if you're a developer, that's very easy to kind of, I'm not gonna say easy, but it's more accessible to do. But if someone is, say, like a test, as a tester, I know I don't do all my testing of an application like in Android Studio. So yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, and I am wearing the Alley Cat shirt. Yes.
Ah, you saw that question. Great.
Yes.
I think we had a follow-up question on the color contrast. What is the best way to do color contrast test using hex value to color picker? So just some advice on what the best way to do that contrast test.
Um, I this one's a little. I think this is slightly. You know, I'm not gonna, because I'm not gonna really. I really can't. I've just used hex value. I don't want to say that's the best way. So I so I I'm going to again kind of ask other people if there's a better way. That's just one of those things of where I'm like, I haven't done a lot of kind of with color contrast. So and the stuff I've done, it was just, yeah. So
Yeah.
so,
I
it's
hear
like
you.
I
I
have
hear
to,
you. Sure.
yeah.
We'll go ahead and open that up towards the end so people could talk about it. And honestly, you know, our discussion with what could you give a 20-minute presentation on? There's so many different ways to test color contrast that perhaps could be an entire 20-minute
Yeah.
presentation in and of itself. So we'll go ahead and table that towards the end if we have a little bit of time. I'm just making sure that I have some of the other questions that we have in here. One moment. For 2.5.2, allowing a user to cancel a triggered event, are there recommended events to ensure we account for, or is the ideal to have this on most or all?
Can you repeat that one? Sorry.
So allowing a user to cancel a triggered event, are there recommended events to ensure that we account for, or is the idea to have this on most or all? So feel free to chime in. That was from Steve. If I'm not capturing that question right, or if you wanted to clarify, feel free to take yourself off mute or to clarify that in the chat.
Yeah, maybe I worded it weird. I was just wondering what kind of events would we want users to cancel? The one that came to mind initially was like a delete or something that could not be taken back, but I was wondering
Yes.
if there are others
Yeah.
that we could.
Yeah, so anything that's for that really is going to alter content, so like delete, um, anything that's going to submit like a form or anything like that. So say you're, someone's clicking, if you have say a form on your application has a form, and the user is kind of clicks, kind of touches the button, and there's multiple options, and those options are going to allow them to send something, and there's no way to back out of it. As soon as they complete that action, that sends it. So you don't want things like that, especially if there's no way, there's only, once you're in the action, there's no way out of it. And the completion of that action is going to submit or remove content, or remove any a functionality from that application or that form.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
We have a question from Sophia. Any advice on getting buy-in for supporting WCAG 2.1 as opposed to just WCAG 2.0 AA, which is more common in lawsuit rulings?
Which is more common in lawsuit rulings? How
to get buy-in for 2.1 as opposed to 2.0, since that's traditionally been used in the lawsuit ruling.
Personally, I haven't run into this issue, but I think the best way is to say that we're getting to the point, especially when it comes from, if you are a company that has any presence on the web, which means you have presence on mobile devices, that adhering to 2.1 means you're also solving for mobile accessibility issues. And the thing is, it's like, well, why not support 2.1? Again, it's all the success criteria for 2.0 are in 2.1 with added, and I like to, kind of just like with added protection. Added protection for mobile accessibility. Things to do. 2.1 also kind of deals with the older population, things for that affect older populations. So I think just saying, hey, let's just be, instead of being, defensive, we're on the offensive. I've not played sports. I think that's a good analogy. So pretty much it's just saying things are going to move to 2.0. That's going to be kind of eventually the legal kind of adherence. So let's just get a jump on that. I think if you put it in that way, sometimes you can't appeal to the humanity of people, appeal to the pocket, and just say, hey, this is, eventually 2.1 will be started to be cited in lawsuits. So let's just try to circumvent that.
Absolutely, great. We have another question. Let's see. Would you recommend using CSS media queries for not restricting content to a single display, or no?
You don't want to use I'm gonna have to. I'll have to get back to you. Let me look at something. I'm actually that's a little bit outside of my mind. And I'm gonna think about that one. If someone wants to answer it, otherwise I can get back to you to make sure I can find out for you really quickly.
Sure.
After
No
this.
problem. Not a problem. And again, we can open it up for discussion afterwards, so we can certainly hear from others as well on some of these questions and ideas that others might have. One last question before we go ahead and wrap up and open that up to a larger discussion is, How about Lighthouse on the web? Any thoughts on their accessibility audit? Are there areas that can be improved?
I I don't, so I've used it. I feel that it's a tool. It's not something to rely, it's not the end all be all. It's just it's another tool. I think it's good at letting you know about some things that you need to look more into. It's one of those things of, there's an article and I'm forgetting the author's name that actually got a hundred a complete, like, this is great accessibility on a site that was completely inaccessible. And so you can't over rely on tools. It seems like it. I know it's nice to think that you could just push a button and then it's going to tell you everything you need to know. And then as long as you fix or do things to that, every time you run it and fix the things on there, that you're good and you're golden. But that's just not the case. And so I feel that Lighthouse is good to kind of, it's a good starting place. But there's so many things that you can't, it can't account for. There's so many, yeah. So it's one of those things, like, it's fine. Just don't think it's, don't use it and think you're gonna be like, oh, cool. Lighthouse said we're completely accessible, because you'll find yourself in one of these lawsuits. Like, because yeah.
Awesome, awesome. And I love that our chat community is posting the
Yes.
references that you mentioned. I don't know if you can see that. They actually posted the link already to the article
Yes.
that you mentioned, which is fantastic.
Thank you.
So I want to thank you again, and also give the group a chance to thank you again. Feel free to take yourselves off mute and do a little golf clap again. Thank you so very much. We appreciate the talk. You did an amazing job.
Thank you
I really
all
appreciate
so
you joining
much.
us. Awesome. And folks can go ahead and unmute themselves. And as I said, we'll go ahead and give some time for some discussion afterwards. I just want to mention again, the job post, we did have some folks posting jobs that they were looking for to fill, as well as that they were looking for jobs as well. So go ahead and scroll up if you are in the category of either looking or looking for a job. We do have that posted in chat, but yep, as I said, go ahead, feel free to take yourselves off mute. We can talk about some of those things that were raised, whether that's the color contrast issue, or whether that was the media query of whether or not to restrict it. So go ahead and chime in. And if you need a drop, feel free to drop as well. This will be posted on our YouTube afterwards. And as we said, we have the links for the slides posted in the meetup group.
I'm wondering if we can get some more context on that CSS media query question.
We cannot hear you. I can hear you just barely coming through.
Okay, how about now?
That is much better.
Yeah, there's an issue with my headphone port apparently, but okay, my name is Greg, everybody. It's nice to meet you all. And I guess what I was asking in regards to the media query question is for instance with media queries, how they've been used, how media queries are used to basically have content fit the size, have content fit for like different devices on different screen sizes. I was wondering if that could be used in the same way as well too on a mobile device, in order to have it not fit to like a single, just a single one display, or not.
Yeah, yeah, I'm actually unsure about that. So I will, I mean, I can look that up because that's something I know I should know. And I know I've dealt with this before, but for the life of me, I can't remember what it was.
That's completely fine.
Yeah, I will. But no, I will. Yeah. So I will. If you get in contact with me, I will find this out for you because I want. I need to figure out the answer too.
Well, quick follow-up, maybe question with that, Gregory, is so you're talking about like media queries for websites. I understand that, but are you talking about, is there an analogous type of technology for native app mobile development?
I guess the thing is, what I'm saying for media queries is that media queries or CSS media queries, like they fit content into kind of like how responsive design works, or like how media queries are used in responsive design. They fit content with they fit content into different screen widths. That can be both for desktop or mobile or tablet, or even like I believe a television screen width. I'm not too sure, but yeah, they can. But yeah, like that's what I specifically mean by media queries also fitting into that like mobile screen width as well too.
Right. Well, I was just asking about technology-wise. If you're talking about all all web version of technology, whether you view the web on your desktop or view it on your TV or view it on a mobile device, yes, CSS media queries absolutely do. I mean, that's the whole point. It looks at your device size. I didn't know if you were asking for native app development, which is very specific to iOS or Android, right? Those have a way to develop your app so that you can view it in portrait and landscape. But other than those two orientations, I'm not aware of any native app type thing to allow different types of queries.
Okay, got it. That makes sense.
And I do believe there's also CSS media queries that allow us to know whether they are in portrait or landscape mode. It's not to lock them into one or the other, but if there was something that was preferable on portrait but not on landscape, that is something that could be affected with CSS as well.
Okay, got it.
I think some good examples of this is actually either you can bring up Google Maps on any device, or at least with an iPhone, if you bring up the calculator, putting it in portrait versus putting it in landscape will reveal very different things. So having features that are hidden away that people wouldn't be able to access in one particular orientation is really where the problem is. So that's what the specific conformance item is talking about, rather than mobile web. It's talking about the apps and being able to change that orientation without losing any kind of functionality. So that's probably what the ambiguity is here over media queries. That's a completely different conformance item. So maybe if we could think of it in that regard, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Any further discussion? Anything you'd like to mention? Any shameless self-promotion that you would like to mention at this juncture? Awesome. I guess that that is going to wrap. We're going to wrap a little bit. Well, I guess we're a little bit over. So thank you everybody so much for coming, and thank you to our sponsor McDonald's for the live captioning. And don't forget, we do have the event coming up for Global Accessibility Awareness Day. on May 21st, where myself, Kirdra, and Fen will be talking about invisible disabilities. So join us a little bit later in the month. Otherwise, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.